Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to this Unbreakable Self training session. I'm Dr. Dave. In this training session, we're going to take the Unbreakable Mind model and we're going to start to apply our first practice and understanding what that first practice is so that you can ultimately develop an unbreakable mind. So let's dive into it right now. All right, guys, in this training session, like I said, we're going to dive into exactly what the Unbreakable Mind is, that model. We already talked about the Unbreakable Mind model. If you haven't watched that lesson, go to How to Reprogram Your Mind, which is the Unbreakable Mind model, understanding what we're looking at right here, this cycle. And then we're going to dive into the first practice. If you're in the academy, amazing. You're going to walk through. You're going to also have a bunch of resources as to exactly how to do these things. Not just talking about the what, but we're going to talk about the what in this video, exactly what you need to do, and then the how is in the next module. But if you're watching from the world, you can dive into the Unbreakable Academy by clicking the link below. Check it out. You're going to get a ton out of it. Again, it's going to be going through this cycle, exactly how to uncover these things and exactly the exact practices that I use in order to be what I call unbreakable. Now, again, if you haven't already watched that video talking about what does it mean to be unbreakable, being unbreakable at the end of the day is truly just the practice to be an effective human. If you understand the basic physics of life, understanding how life was originated and how life exists, because we are a life form. If you know that, then you know that you have to take action. You have to create a practice. A practice is a ritual, a habit, whatever you want to call it. It's a practice daily, weekly, monthly, you name it. And this is the practice that we're going to use for the mind. Now, again, the practice is our ability to see this, our ability to use this, and our ability to process emotion, process our situations, and move forward so we can get a better result. We can take a better action, ultimately getting a better result, ultimately getting a better situation. Now, in this video, I'm going to dive into exactly what the situation or what we're going to do in the first step. All right, so we're going to look at the situation of our life, understand the basic context of it, and then give you the what. And again, in the academy, we're going to dive into the exact how, and you'll be able to actually get the practices and practice along with me, kind of with a follow along. So what I need you to know is that anytime we start to experience the world, it's because we're looking at the three-dimensional, what we think is three-dimensional, like our body. You know, obviously, you're watching me on a computer screen or on your phone right now, or some type of maybe tablet or some type of like computing device, right? And like you're holding it, or it's on the desk, and you're telling yourself, "Oh, this is real." Right? This is the reality, like this marker, right? Like this is the reality. But in fact, this is not the reality. And your situation is actually not your reality. And you're probably wondering, like, what are you talking about right now, bro? Like, what peyote are you on? But just understand this. This thing, this idea of a marker, I could set this on fire, right? I could put this in a kiln. And in a matter of minutes, this is completely gone, right? So did this ever exist? Now you're probably wondering, again, what am I talking about? But this is just a combination of carbon molecules and hydrogen and oxygen, and there's some other molecules in there that and elements that are put together, these anatomic bonds that are put together to create this thing called a marker, and we call this a marker, right? So we give this thing a name. We think of this thing as a situation, right? This is a marker. And then all of a sudden, we tell ourselves something about that marker. Now, here's the interesting thing. I'm using the example of a marker because it's emotionless, right? This is just a marker to you. Now, you could have been beat by a marker, and you might have an emotional experience by that, now, which is obviously not very likely. But the reason I'm using a marker is because it's emotionless, and you can actually understand this context, because when you're in the emotion of the thing, you get swept into the emotion of it and you're gone because your brain flips off. And we'll talk about that in the emotional section. But what the emotion is of this is nothing, really. It's just a marker. You're like, oh, it's just a marker. Yeah, you use it to write on a board and whatnot. Now, this is the important thing I want you to understand. The physical reality is actually not reality. And if you watch The Matrix, the movie The Matrix from the late 90s, it's kind of a really interesting and deep context. It's a sci-fi movie, but there's this idea that we're living in this matrix, and this is our physical reality. It's not a real reality, and in fact, there's something behind the scenes that we're all sort of just living in a simulation. I'm not saying we're living in a simulation, but the more you dive into your own subconscious mind, the more you dive into your own world, you're going to realize, oh my goodness, I'm actually looking at this thing. Let's say it's a marker. I'm calling it a marker. I'm experiencing it as a marker, but does the marker even exist? And has it existed before? Again, we put it together to create a marker, but does it actually exist? And if you understand that the marker never existed in the first place, now you have control. Now, how do you get there? Of course, you're probably thinking, wow, what peyote is this guy smoking? But if you understand that, and you can understand that viscerally, and when I say viscerally, I mean like in your body, in your being, and you can understand that every situation you have in your life doesn't actually exist. You just perceive it as existing, but in reality, it's actually sort of just this game that we're all playing, and it's in the emotional state. It's in the state of emotion that we're actually experiencing the world. Then all of a sudden, you're just like, oh, I want to have control of this emotion. That's exactly the whole point of all this, because you want to have better control of your emotions, because if you have more control of your emotions, now you're going to be a healthier person. Now you're going to have less inflammation in your body. You're going to get sick less. You're going to be healthier overall. It's not just to feel good, right? There's all this secondary benefit from it. But if we understand that the situation is just it, right? It's almost like watching, and this is a perfect example. You're watching me right now on a screen, or if you watch a movie on a screen, you actually experience the emotion that the hero or the antagonist is having while on that screen. And if you stop and you think, oh, if I just tune out the music, I don't have the same visceral experience. I don't have the same emotional experience. And again, all the movie makers are playing into is just the statement and the meaning we're putting to ourselves. They're going on social norms. They're going on the way they think humans should interact. So if somebody, harms another person and they use a lot of visual context about that person being harmful, you think, oh, that's a harmful person, and now you feel the harm that person is having. Again, we're all just these social beings. We're like this mirror for each other. But here's the interesting thing. This is how you step away from the matrix, as they say. I'm getting so excited I'm dropping pens. Is you realize that the situation doesn't matter. This is just a screen. This is just a movie. This is your life, right? But this is a movie. Now, of course, you want to take it seriously. You don't want to just throw it away, because it's just the basis upon which you get to experience that which you call life. But you are not the situation. The you that you think is you, the you that you think is you is the situation, but the you that is you is not the situation. The true you is not the situation that you're living right now. And that is super important to note. So, what do we do with that? Now, of course, how do we get there? I'm going to pick my pen back up because I was getting so excited. How do we get there? How do we understand how to step away from the situation? How do we move ourselves away from the emotion of the situation? Is that we simply go into meditation. And when I say meditation, I don't mean sitting in an ashram somewhere in Nepal, even though that would be really cool. That'd be a lot of fun for me. But meditation is simply the act of observation. Observing. You are going to simply now observe your life from an objective perspective. It's almost like you're going to be the experimenter, the scientist of your own well-being, your own life. And in fact, that's what Buckminster Fuller had to do. Buckminster Fuller was a scientist in the early 1900s, middle 1900s, and he was in his point of despair, and there's a story about him. When he got to that point in his life, he was sitting on a park bench and he was looking out, contemplating his own suicide, and he realized, wait, I'm a scientist. If I just look at my life as a scientist, if I just experiment with my own life and just observe what happens, now all of a sudden I don't have the visceral emotion to the situation, and that was the first step. So being the observer of your own reality, be the experimenter, understand the scientific method, understand what that is, understand that you observe first, you create a hypothesis, and you create your experiment, you act in the experiment, and then you observe what happens without emotional, visceral feel. Now, what did he do? Of course, when you're the observer, you actually take the statement and the meaning away from the depths. But we have to go into it. If you want to be an unbreakable human, your unbreakable self, you have to go into the meaning of it. So you and I are going to do that. But Buckminster Fuller was understanding of the first step, which is you need to have a sense of meditation, mindfulness, observation, purely just be the observer. That's literally it. So if you are the observer of the situation, you can pull yourself away from the situation. You understand that you are not the situation. You are not the reason your business partner chose not to use the contract that you both signed, right? You are not the reason that your wife is leaving you. You are not the reason that you don't have any money. That's it, period. Now, of course, you're responsible for those things. You are responsible for those things, but you are not those things. You are responsible to process the emotion of those things as you observe them based on your statement, your meaning, your emotion, your reaction, and ultimately results. But if you understand that you are not that thing, now you can take correct action and incorrect action after you go through this process. Now you're going to get a better result, better situation. You're going to get a situation that you otherwise want. Now you think the situation is going to bring you here, but what you're not realizing is that you got to do the thinking part of it, right? The feeling part of it, the action part of it, and then you're going to be like, oh, now I have the $1 million in the bank and I feel good. No. You have to do them all. You got to think, you got to feel, you got to act, and you got to observe, right? So what's step number one? You got to observe, period. Okay, so that's step number one. Now, again, if you're in the academy, I dive deep into the actual contexts of meditation, of observing, there's different ways to meditate. You can meditate seated, you can meditate standing. There's quantum meditation, there's transcendental meditation, which I have no context for, but I'm just giving you an example. But I teach you a couple ways in which you can meditate and understand and step away from the situation, start to observe it, because the more you practice that, the more you're able to then go into each one of these steps and become unbreakable, which is great. So again, step number one is meditation. Just meditate. That's it. Just meditate. That's the first step you got to do. But again, of course, you have to go into the next one. Now, that's where I personally was not getting the right results. I was always thinking, I was meditating. I'm like, I'm meditating. Why is my life not changing? It's because I wasn't going into the statement and the meaning of it. That's it, which we're going to dive into in the next lesson. Okay, so step number one, must meditate. You must meditate. And if you meditate, then you can step away from the situation. That is the point of meditation, is just to step away from that which you call reality, to observe reality as it really is, not as you think it is. That's the point. It's just to hold space, just to move you away, period. It's not to be the end-all, be-all. It's not to make you some magical guru that lives in an ashram that's, healing with your hands and all that stuff, but just to give you the space. That's the point. All right, now, in the next lesson, we'll talk about statement and meaning. We'll dive into that. You're going to get a ton out of it. Again, if you're in the academy, just go into the next lesson. Here, we'll talk about statement. We'll talk about meaning. I might put them together. I don't know yet. But start with meditation. If you're not in the academy and you want to dive into the actual how, check out the academy. You'll get a ton out of it. I promise you this. And then let's dive into statement. Guys, stay unbreakable. If you like this information, please share it. I want everybody in the world to know this information, because this is the stuff that I wish I had when I was going through my journey. Again, I was meditating and nothing was changing. Why? Oh, because I wasn't doing the whole thing, right? You got to do the whole thing. All right, so we're going to go through step by step exactly what the whole thing is, how to get more out of it. I'll see you in the next lesson. I love you guys. Stay unbreakable. We'll see you there.